Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin, and New York Times national reporter Mike Baker. Mike, this is your reporting. Give us a little bit more about Maria Farmer, what she told you, and why it's relevant right now.
Yeah, I mean, this was someone who had, a known history with Jeffrey Epstein, having worked for him, been in his orbit, and had developed over time when she was around him all these concerns about these girls that were coming and going, these women that were coming and going supposedly for modeling gigs. And then also to her, these powerful people, Donald Trump being one of them, Bill Clinton being one of them. He was president at the time. And so by the time that she got to the end of her time with Epstein, when she said she was sexually assaulted and then had concerns about her own sister's experience around Epstein, she says she goes to the police. She wants to raise concerns. And it's not just, here's my experience, personal experience, but she really wants the law enforcement to look at this broader circle. Who are all these people? Why are they around him? I don't have any evidence of some wrongdoing here, but she wants to know, what's the broader story? What's going on around Jeffrey Epstein?
Why is she so curious about the broader story? Why does she believe that it's relevant to the FBI, to law enforcement, that he has a circle of high-profile, highly powered people around him?
Yeah, I mean, her concern was she was seeing a lot of alarming things about Jeffrey Epstein and his actions. And she was just trying to understand at the time, why are all these powerful people suddenly surrounding him? And I think she just felt like this was something for law enforcement to address. So she says she just raised all these concerns. And then specifically, as you mentioned, there was this encounter she had with Donald Trump that she describes in 1995. And so when she went to law enforcement in 1996, this was just another thing that she says she wanted to raise and bring up and say, hey, this is something I think you guys should look at a little deeper.
So the interesting thing here, Lisa, is that this is the sort of information that would likely come out, could likely come out, if the Epstein files were released. This one names Donald Trump. You could see some other names in there. But these are people who have not been charged.
Correct.
So you're putting out into the ether what?
You're putting out accusations about them that law enforcement at the time did not consider sufficiently credible or sufficiently criminal to predicate an investigation of their own conduct. Now, I should say some of this information is already in the public domain based on the unsealing of materials, for example, in civil cases involving Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and allegations of sex trafficking. For example, before I came on set with you today, I was reading excerpts of a deposition given by Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who has now dead but was one of the most prominent Epstein accusers. She alleged in portions of her deposition transcripts that were unsealed that she was trafficked to a number of powerful people, and she named some of them in portions of those transcripts that anyone can see on a public docket from the Southern District of New York.
So why would that information not come out publicly before now? I mean, you just mentioned some of it is public, but why would the administration, the past administration, this administration, when the Epstein clamor was getting louder, why would they not just release it? Say, here's everything that investigators found. The people who aren't charged weren't charged for a reason.
Well, I think, first of all, it's not typical for the Department of Justice to say somebody should be exculpated for conduct that hasn't been proven. What they were interested in at the time was Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell as the leads of this sex trafficking ring that, from all accounts, largely existed to satisfy Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein's own desires, not the desires of a larger group of people. The Department of Justice is not in the business of typically saying, hey, look over here at these people who are uncharged. In fact, it's against Department of Justice policy to do so in the ordinary course.
Why in the legal profession would you find it uncomfortable? Why would it make you nervous to release this information when people are demanding it?
Well, I think, first of all, the demands are higher now than they ever have been. But why wouldn't you do it? Because some people would say that their reputation would take a hit by the release of this information, that it's, not only is it uncomfortable, but it is borderline defamatory for them to be named in it. Think about the Mueller report, which is something that I always go back to when I'm thinking about this, and how many redactions were in that report originally. It's because so many of the people who come up anecdotally throughout that report were never charged. And even though Nobody in the report said those people were criminally culpable. To even associate them with that, you could argue would have such an impact on their reputation that it's not worthy of being unredacted. Now, here, there are mitigating factors, right? Jeffrey Epstein is dead. The prosecution of Ghislaine Maxwell has been affirmed, at least by the Second Circuit. She has a pending cert petition at the Supreme Court right now.
What is a cert petition?
She's asking the Supreme Court to review her conviction. That's up to them to decide whether they're going to or not. She doesn't have an appeal as of right. But we are 6 years past the indictment of Jeffrey Epstein. But there are all sorts of good reasons not to have these people's name in the public domain. But the other thing, Katie, that I would say to you, I'll go back to, if people are really curious about the Epstein files, I can't underscore enough how much of this information is already public, not only through the diligent public reporting of people like Mike or Julie Brown at the Miami Herald, but also on public court dockets where you can read extensive deposition transcripts. It may be that that the far right is worked up about just isn't there.
That is interesting. Vaughn, what is the White House worried about when they are considering what to release and what not to release? Why is the president saying there is no there? Why is the president calling anyone who's demanding this release a weakling? Why is he suing the Wall Street Journal for $10 billion over a birthday note?
I think it's because of Mike's reporting and the Wall Street Journal's reporting is that there is very clearly more inside of these files that perhaps does not amount to criminal conduct by the sitting president of the United States, but definitely does not paint him in a flattering light. And it only calls into question statements that the president has already historically made on the record about being able to sexually abuse women. This is, for the president, a relationship that he engaged with Jeffrey Epstein, a friendship, a business relationship, whatever you want to call this relationship, one that lasted upwards of 15 years, a lot longer than most friendships. And I think if you look at going back to 2023, Lisa has been very on point for consistently going back to the E. Jean Carroll trial. The president had the opportunity to testify before a jury to the lawsuit that he had sexually abused E. Jean Carroll. And when presented the opportunity to take the stand and testify, he declined to do that. And very similar, I think, in this Wall Street Journal lawsuit, the $10 billion one that he has filed against the Dow Jones and the reporters here. If he actually were to try to take this lawsuit to court, they could seek to go and have him sit for a deposition. And I think there's a serious question of whether the president, when presented such opportunities, has consistently tried to not take the stand and not actually put his name under oath. I think that there is a question about what is already in the public record and a history of this president denying things like, for example, with his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, he has denied ever being on that private plane of Jeffrey Epstein. At the same time, flight logs show and suggest that he was on the flight at least 7 times with him.
Well, that's interesting. What about this material that Steve Bannon says he has? A number of hours, 15 hours of unseen footage of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm still waiting to hear back from Steve Bannon here Monday afternoon. We first reached out over on Friday, along with Stephanie Ruhle. We're reporting that Steve Bannon has 15 hours plus of footage that he personally shot with Jeffrey Epstein back in 2018, late 2018, early 2019, before Epstein was rearrested. Now, why were these two men working together? Why does Bannon have this 15 hours of footage? Well, Bannon has suggested that early next year, he's going to release a documentary showing how Epstein was in the middle of this global cabal at the same time. If we're doing the math, that's 7 years, a time period in which he's had possession of these 15 hours of footage. And Mark Epstein, I talked to him on Friday. He's the brother of Jeffrey Epstein, Katie, and he made the specific request that he wants to see the videotapes that Steve Bannon has. He said that the two men actually met in late 2019, early 2020, after Jeffrey Epstein died in prison, and that Bannon, according to Mark Epstein, had requested a certain amount of funding to help put this documentary together. Mark Epstein tells me that he declined that invitation. At the same time, he said he hasn't been able to get back in touch with Steve Bannon, and the American public nor the brother of Jeffrey Epstein have seen that footage. Steve Bannon has been publicly calling for the unsealing of all the evidence of special counsel, but he hasn't put forward the own videotapes that he has in his personal possession.
So